Welcome to The Grant, the EU funding podcast. The Grant. My name is Nikolaj, and I'm the creator, editor, and host of The Grant. The Grant is an independent podcast initiative with the ambition to dig into all corners of the EU R&D funding system on topics of interest for the full EU R&D funding community. Talent attraction to Europe has become a thing. Countries, regions, municipalities, communities of all sizes, and not least the European Commission is realizing that we need talent attraction from third countries and talent circulation within the EU not to deteriorate. Hence, EU funding is allocated to support communities to shape initiatives that attract talent, and especially so to rural regions. In this week's episode, I have two guests, Project Manager in Vasa Region Development Company Maria Haglund and Chief Operating Officer in Copenhagen Capacity Nikolaj Lubanski. Nikolaj has a decade-long experience accessing funding for talent attraction projects. Maria would like to get started. So, this episode is both an episode about funding talent attraction and an episode where Maria asks all the curious questions on how to approach this, and Nikolaj and myself helps to clarify how to get going. Very informative for many of you out there, even if you're not into talent attraction. Please enjoy. Grant. Welcome to The Grant, the EU funding podcast. Today, I am merging one of my former positions that had very little to do with EU funding with this podcast of very much so to do with EU funding. When I worked for Triangle Region Denmark, when I had enough of being fired and laid off from my different positions, I worked with absolutely nothing that had to do with EU funding. It was fantastic, as some of my regulars they know. But we were attached to a project that was funded by the EU Commission, and that was related to talent attraction. So that's the topic of today. And I've already spoken way too much because I have two guests in here today from that I met through my work back then. So, Maria, Nikolaj, welcome.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Pleasure to have you in, and it's been fantastic pre-meetings where we've been discussing this and shaping this and so on. So that's it. This, I can only imagine that's going to be a very nice conversation. Now, before we do anything else, you need to present yourself. And Nikolaj, always, ladies first. Maria.
Okay, thank you for the invitation. So nice to be here. My name is Maria Haglund, and I work for a small regional development company called Vasek, and I represent 7 municipalities. And we are located here in Finland, in the west coast of Finland. And my work it's focusing on issues related to talent attraction, availability of skilled workforce, and I would say that the work is highly diverse. So it's ranging from strengthening student retention. We have 6 universities in the region, but also attracting skilled individuals from abroad, and then leading different kind of networks here in the region that is focusing on vitality of the region.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. Nikolaj.
Yeah, thank you so much, Niels, and thank you so much, Maria, for taking part in this. I'm so looking so much forward to our discussions. I'm Nikolaj Lubanski. I'm the CEO of Copenhagen Capacity, and Copenhagen Capacity is the formal investment promotion agency of Greater Copenhagen. Means that the company, or the business foundation, not-for-profit business foundation as it is, are attracting investments, companies, and then for the last 13 years or almost 14 years coming up, we have been attracting also international talent, and a bit of the same range as you, Maria, going all the way from highly skilled professionals over student attraction, also to research attractions. With the latest newcomer that we're doing is called Science Hub Denmark. We're attracting researchers to Danish universities. Yes, I think that's the intro from my side.
Thanks. And so we're going to talk about EU funding and talent attraction. We sort of framed it for rural regions from the capital region, Nikolaj, but we sort of framed it for Maria because the dynamics of this conversation is going to be you, Nikolaj, your experience. You've been doing project resource attracting fundraising for many, many years. You're very experienced with this. Maria, you would like to, but you haven't done much. Some local funding from Finland, but you want to take a step into this. So that's the dynamic of this conversation. We're going to talk about the area of talent attraction, how it works with EU funding, and how you can get on board with this. So that's for you listeners out there, giving some inspiration on how to approach this. Now, the first block we have, it's on the motivation and why look for EU funding and all. And maybe, Nikolaj, can you maybe just start out to give an insight or give your introduction to why funding makes sense within this area?
Yes, absolutely, I will. And to put it very short, I think we wouldn't be in Denmark or in the capital region of Copenhagen. We wouldn't be the place on the talent attraction side without the EU funding. To start on the high note, it would have been impossible for us to do the national collaboration. It would have been impossible for us to do the amount of partnerships that we've done and the amount of digital campaigns and efforts that we've done in this shape without the EU funding. Like when I started 13 years ago, I was actually employed. At that time I was named the talent director of Copenhagen capacity in order to build up the talent attraction activities, and there was barely nothing. We had one local project that was going on. And the reasons that we started up was the same as most places. Demography changes, lack of highly skilled professionals, companies looking out for talents that were needed not only in Denmark but everywhere else. Also looking at a brand of Denmark that was known maybe for the Little Mermaid and Carlsberg, but not for highly skilled, why they should come to Denmark to work, and what was the assets about that. Mm-hmm. So in that sense, we were very in a similar situation as a lot of other places. And in that sense, we simply started off with saying, what can we do here? We need to get some powers, some resources behind this. We need to find a way. And then we found out this great opportunity that was in the social funds of the EU, that if a region is lacking behind on certain or all competences, then you can actually mitigate that by looking into attracting the people with the right competences in order to lift the whole area of competences in a region. So basically what we looked at, normally you would say that EU funding is about skilling, that you upskill people, or EU funding, not EU funding, but social fund. EU social funds are very much about upskilling people. But if you're in a situation where there's an immediate shortage of labor and of skilled professionals, and you see that the educational path is too long, because it takes 3 to 5 years to educate highly skilled professionals, then you are allowed to use the EU social funds for actually attracting competences and thereby lift the competences in general in your region. And that was like the starting point when we had the discussion with the regional EU officers. So I hope that gives a reason why we got started there. But I have a lot of more things to say about why EU funding and how and so on.
Yeah, and what you can say is that why is the EU Commission throwing money after these kind of initiatives? Naturally, this is one of the big things, not just nationally but on the whole continent, that we're not enough people to do what we want to do. And we don't have enough brilliant minds here to do what we want to do, to develop the growth and to develop the economies and to develop the societies that we live in. So this is why the Commission is supporting these kind of initiatives to say, look, We need more people to come from third countries here to join us with skills, all sorts. Maria, can you share a little bit, because we talk a little bit about the motivation. Now Nikolaj shared a little bit about what this can do, but can you share with us the reality of your local area and what you do there?
Yeah. Well, first, so my previous career, I've been working with regional development, and in this role now for a bit over 2 years.
Mhm.
And in my previous roles, I've been always, building bridges between education and working life, or professionals and working life, and focusing on this domestic market. And have seen the development, how even though we are a vibrant area, but we are still one of the smallest cities here in Finland. So I have seen the trend that all these skilled individuals, so they are immigrating to the southern part of Finland. So the capital area is really attracting all of the professionals. So even though we have the 6 universities here and the steady inflow of, new skilled people, so many of them are choosing after their exams to go back down south. So we have problems with retention. Something else we struggle with is that maybe the demands for labor here, it's quite different from the rest of Finland. So many of Finnish regions, they say that they lack highly educated individuals, but what we are lacking here are like blue collar workers, since we have this energy cluster with over 180 energy technology companies. So there is a lot of a huge network of subcontractors who are doing that, concrete work with their hands. And this is something that we have hard time finding. We have the same issue as in the other Nordic countries and in EU overall, that the small age groups are diminishing, and the amount of people coming out from vocational schools, so they aren't enough. And one thing also, in the era of AI is that, this is not maybe concerning these blue collar workers, but when it comes to these highly educated professionals, so the starting positions, they are kind of vanishing. Companies are expecting to have like people with high skills and expertise, so they are not willing to educate these like fresh comers. So I think the situation has switched. So when I came here 2 years ago, I entered a project that was written by someone else, and we had 4 target groups. So we were working a lot with university students, both within retention and within attraction. But something I wanted to add was to help companies to become more open towards internationals, because we haven't been doing that here in these parts of Finland, even though we are the second most international city in Finland, if you take the proportion or the size of the city into account. So we haven't been doing anything with the internationals. We have a lot of programs who are helping the talents themselves, but we are not helping companies to become more, international. And I think this is something we need in order to, to make it in the competition in the future. So I have started my own kind of lobbying program towards the companies, and also here within the organization, that we need to be, more like looking wider to and above Europe also, because we know that we are already competing from the same competencies here within Europe. So this is something, if you have been doing this for 13 years, so this is something that we are already only starting now at the moment.
What I want to guide you a little bit towards is, guide you towards sharing with us considerations on EU funding and funded projects to support you with these challenges. So I know in the pre-talk you have been doing nationally funded things. You have yourself a background in regional development, so you're familiar with that sort of world of funding. Can you share a little bit about what your considerations have been so far when it comes to these things on the EU funding side?
Well, in our organizations, we have projects ongoing. I think we have more than 10 projects ongoing, and we have some EU-funded projects at the moment as well. But when I've been discussing and thinking about the possibility of applying for EU funding for this topic, so the reaction is somewhat, interesting. It is seen as, a lot of, they think that it's a lot of reporting work, and, it demands, so the input and the output, it doesn't match in the same way, or they think it's heavier to run this EU project. So I don't know. I'm always, willing to run projects, because I think that it kind of gets you focused, and it forces you to build some kind of structure to your work. You have some concrete goals you need to reach to. So I'm willing to do that. But maybe, the burden of bureaucracy and reporting has been like the main issue why we haven't been applying just yet.
So bureaucracy.
Mm.
But I think you have a great point there, Maria, about why should you do it? So, and your consideration around it, because of course, one of the things you touched upon is this the target-orientated purpose of a project, and that's where we've seen it to ignite, or you can say, be an engine for changing some things, that you can actually say, okay, now we have a 3-year focus in a project, and we are now at level C. We would like to be to level A, and how can we do that? So it's a I see it as an engine for development that you could ignite, and also you could say push things further forward through these things. And then I think you touched upon another great thing, is the structural part, is that by getting into partnerships, you also relate to other partners, that you bind yourself together somewhat on a common effort. Just to put one example on that, is that, as you know, Niels, very well, there's been a big competition also among cities in Denmark around, as you said before, Maria, that a lot of people will head down to the Helsinki region. But I don't think that's actually necessarily the angle you should take on it, because what we've worked on is to build a national partnership and then accept the differences. And by doing that in an EU project, coming back to your structural point on structure, is that by doing that, you actually force each other to work together and find how can we actually assist each other. Because I think we succeeded in agreeing upon, at least not convincing, but agreeing upon at least that we are not in a direct competition here. It's different people that would like to go different places. So the capital is probably more in a competition with Stockholm or Munich or Berlin or something like that than some of the other cities. So seeing that and get a structural or collaboration going on in a formal project also makes you be more, you can say, reliant on each other and then collaborative in that sense.
Yeah, we are taking part in these Business Finland projects and, fairs and all these, things that happen abroad. And I have seen the same thing there. Many people want to, live urban lives in big cities. Well, we don't have any big cities here in Finland. If we have 600,000 people living in Helsinki, so that's nothing. But still, so if they want to go somewhere in Finland and to have something that's somewhat common to their normal life now, so they will choose Helsinki. But many people also want to get away from the busy lifestyle. They want to go somewhere quiet. They want to go somewhere, where life is more affordable. So it has been a privilege to be with the big cities. We have actually managed to get ourselves to these occasions where we normally have all these big cities from Finland represented, but now also the little city of Vaasa with 70,000 inhabitants is also there joining them. So we have something different to give to these talents. So if you want to, be living in the countryside and still have like only 30 minutes to work to Vaasa, so that's possible, and you're not basically not paying anything for the living. So I truly agree with you that we have like different strengths and we should be like more in a coalition doing the same thing. But this is something that is already organized by Business Finland. So now I'm thinking more like something that we discussed with Niels. So we have this joint strategy with the city of Umeå, That is on the other side of the Gulf, on the Swedish side. So we have this cooperation strategy that reaches out to 2030. And there we have 4 different work packages. And we have one work package focusing on talent attraction. And I'm responsible for that for the Finnish side. And that is something we have been struggling with. I think we have the same ambition and we have the willingness. We want to go abroad and we want to make a greater visibility for the region because, the norther up you go here in the Nordics, so the more distant it is for the talent. So I think that kind of coalition, we have the kind of the key idea is that we want to work together, but nobody has the time. We have no kind of assets and resources to do that work. So everybody is trying to do it pro bono. So here is something concrete that I'm thinking that EU funding could help. We could apply for a joint project there.
Listen, you have an established cooperation with another region in your neighboring country there, but it's difficult to allocate time and resources on a day-to-day basis when there's no funding following that, because that's just the nature of things. If you have things where you say, we have to do this and this and this tasks related to strategic points in what you do, then the thing where you don't get any funding, it's always been put aside. And I think we should move into the next block, where we start to attack that a little bit. So slowly folding out how you, Marie, can exactly use something like this as an example with the collaboration already established, how you can make that a skeleton that you can put meat on the bones funding-wise to maybe establish something. Just use it as an example as we work out through the conversation here. But maybe, so the first section we have put here is as before you apply. So what do organizations need to consider when stepping into this wonderful room of funding? And Nikolaj, you being the expert here, I'm taking myself out of that equation. I'm just the critical mass. Nikolaj, can you start to sketch that a little bit out here?
Yes, absolutely. And I wanted to say, since our meeting, I've had some thoughts. And of course, I think always when you talk about projects, whether EU projects or not, you always, the big idea. What is the good idea behind the project? And so you need to have alignment of what is the key task that you're trying to solve with this project. And what is the beautiful idea? Because if you don't have a good idea, it can be difficult to drag all the way through. And sometimes, you start with a grand idea and then you end with something different, but at least the idea got it started. So an idea or an ambition, I could just put an example on that, is that we started very locally, as I said before, in the Copenhagen region, made a talent strategy for Copenhagen. But then very fast thereafter, we found out that it doesn't make sense to have such a local strategy because Denmark is a small country, we are closely related. So the idea became to say, okay, we need to do this for Denmark. And then the idea and the ambition of building a national talent partnership for Denmark, which is now named Talent to Denmark, which is a formal name of the talent partnership. And it's just an example of one idea that carried the project through to say, okay, what do we then need to work together and how can we build that idea? A different example is the Greater Copenhagen region, which is also including the southern parts of Sweden in our collaboration, is to say, what can we do? Because it seems odd that we have a lot of people working in that area, but the labor market is very separated. So it's very difficult to go from the Swedish to the Danish side. Now a lot of people are doing it, commuting every day. But for 13 years ago, especially for internationals, it was like two completely different labor markets. Mm-hmm. So again, an idea that carries a project to say, okay, how can we mediate? How can we make sure that it becomes one single labor market? And I know this is not, very visionary ideas necessarily, but it's a common idea. So I think a starting point for every project should be, what is the ambition? What is the idea?
Of course, the concept of what you want to attack, you need to sort of create something that has a certain strength, like Nikolaj just outlined here, and you have that. With the collaboration you have with Umeå, there is a strength just conceptually in the fact that you, on each side of the water, you have a cultural shared history, and you are bound together, so to say, and you already have established a collaboration, which means that already means that you can make a lot of activities folding out in how you would work together on talent attraction. But I think what Maria, and I'm just taking words out of your mouth and putting them into your mouth, what any organization in this world, I've been discussing this in over 200 episodes in this podcast, if you're not used to funding, there are so many worries about what it is. You mentioned administration in the beginning, but it's also a lot of other things that comes with that, right? It's rules that you don't understand. It's budget practices that the accountancy should be aware of. It's do we have the organizational capacity? Do we have the right people to carry out such a thing? Is it enough with you or one colleague? How should the manager be? Yeah, leadership should stand behind this. It shouldn't be an add-on that you come with, and then the management, they says, what's this? Yeah, okay, you can do that. But every time there's an issue with that, throughout the 4 years that it runs, they will say, oh, that bloody project again. You don't want that. Yeah, it's and this is real. It's very real. This is what happens every single day if you don't consider these kind of things. Are there other things, Maria, you have when you have discussed this, or when you talk about projects, are there other things that you are worried about than the bureaucracy?
Well, not me personally. One thing that pops up in every discussion when we talk about this talent attraction cooperation with Umeå, and what concerns other people is that they are really, fearful of that. Umeå will be more attractive to people. When you go abroad, you go to the Netherlands to Immigration Expo and to other fairs, and you meet people. So everybody's heading to Sweden. So they have been doing this branding work for a long time, not as a Sweden United, but the regions have been out there, and they are so afraid of losing people to Umeå. And something I myself, I don't see that as a problem. Once we get them here, if they move from their everyday life somewhere in another country all the way to the Nordics, we have a lot of the task to get them moving to Finland is a lot easier. But there's like this envy and jealousy aspect in this kind of project, that they are thinking that, well, we might kind of lose in this kind of cooperation, that the people that would be coming to our side are going to Sweden, but without the cooperation, they wouldn't be heading nowhere near us. So this is kind of the thing that I don't see as a problem, but this is something we have been discussing, and maybe something that pops in the discussion, since we are doing a lot of collaborative project here at the moment as well. So the different kind of intentions between the companies and the project partners. So you might agree upon an agenda, that this is what we want to do, but that's maybe just to please the other partner, just to get the money, So there is like this fear of people getting into the project only to get money. And we would like to have some real impact, something, that people truly learn about our region, and we are increasing our attractiveness, and people worldwide would know more about us. So is there any ways of making sure that you are aligned with the project partners? That's maybe something I would like to hear from you.
Nikolaj, these things translates into two things if we talk in funding language, right? So this is the fear about the right partners. Yeah. So this is about how do you build the right partnership, and then this idea. It's the money, yeah. This is a square root thing from this podcast, and that anyone facilitating new funds say, don't go for funding if you go for the money. It's not, it shouldn't be about the money. It should be about what you should do. Something that you want to do anyways, and the money should be supporting and taking away the risk or facilitating extra things, to blow extra life into what you want to do anyways. But never, never, never step into something just for the money, because then it's just going to be a grinder. Nikolaj.
I fully agree on the last point, because it takes money to get money. So you also have to have a solid basis of something that you can invest, or partners that would be willing to invest in it. Because most, or if not all, those some very rare exceptions, you need to have a self-financing part. And that self-financing part of the project needs to come from some of the partners, from yourself, or from all the partners in some division. And that means, and that's actually, I think that's very cleverly made from the EU, because that puts your hand on the cooker. It means that you, on the plate, you need to really want this. And then you can, as you said, Niels, you can accelerate you can accelerate the progress, the development, the capacity building, the effort. But you need to actually think of, this is something that we also invest something in ourselves. So you need to really want this, and you need to also be ready for investing some of your own resources into scaling this up. To the other point about partnerships, I think there's many ways that you can build a partnership, but of course, that you are aligned, as we talked about before, Maria, aligned on the ambition. And then you have trust enough, and trust often takes time and a lot of meetings. I remember saying that I took this job as a talent director for Copenhagen 13 years ago. I thought I was traveling the world, going to business fairs and out to all types. And what I spent the first 2 to 3 years was just biking the bridges of Copenhagen, talking to all the local partners and building up trust among us as partners. So it takes a real effort to do that. And then when we've done it in Copenhagen, I could start on the rest of Denmark. And it takes trust. It takes time to build up trust. And that it often takes a lot of meetings. So on building the partnerships, you need to invest time on building the right partnership. Because if you have the trust, and you find, and we've both have partners that absolutely distrusted us. And as you know, from our regional perspectives, Copenhagen is often seen as the one taking it all, the winner takes it all. And, we are the snobby guys that just, thinks everything is Copenhagen is the center of the world, and so on and so forth. So seen from a regional perspective, we often have to actually spend a lot of time saying that we are not in to take something away from you. We are here because we really want to build this partnership. And then, of course, you cannot just say that, you also have to show it. But my point is here, when you then have spent the time of building a right partnership and build up trust, that's where you can start talking about the things that you talked about before, Maria, that could we, by putting our different interests on the table, can we actually see it more as a negotiation game, so to say, my key is interested in this. Now you can almost hear it. I've been inspired for so many years about the getting to yes negotiation method, which it's not only common or opposite interests, but there's also neither nor interests. That means you can actually you can achieve your interest, and it doesn't matter me. It's a neither nor interest for me. So if you, just to put an example back to what you said before, Maria, you might, because I know Umeå is a bit more of a university city as well, so they might be able to, mostly interested in the very highly skilled, where you're most interested in the blue-collar workers. So could that be a separation of saying, okay, we are responsible for the part looking into the skilled workers, professionals, the blue collars, and they are maybe taking main responsibility for attracting the highly skilled or the university students or something like that. So that's when you are into building a good partnership, is that you can start having these talks.
Sorry. Yeah, and that's true. And we have been having a lot of good discussions with my colleagues in Umeå. And something we both share is also like the brain drain that we have to the capital region. So also like, having like these discussions and what is that called benchmarking, the good practices that you have on both sides. So maybe, developing some kind of practices that you can do on both sides that helps the people to stay. But the key thing here is that I have done a lot of work with companies. Most of my career has been about collaboration with companies. And that's the same thing when going into projects. So it's not only like the project partners, but when it comes to talent attraction, you also need the local partners, the companies. And everything takes, or I think everything relies on personal contacts and, relationships. If you are planning some kind of event to the Vasa region, you will not get anyone from the companies to attend if you don't have build some kind of personal relationship with someone in the company. So this is something, I think everything builds upon trust. But I'm thinking, do you have some experiences, or what is your view on like these personal dynamics if you have a project partner from another country? So how important is it to have good dynamics between the people working in the project? Is like the same goal, is it enough, or do you need to have like right people involved as well?
Yeah, I think absolutely, as you said before, Maria, of course it helps a lot when the people dynamic in the groups are great. And often you also need to spend time developing that. So that also means for both the project preparation, as we're talking about now, that how can we actually make sure that these people get together and really have some severe discussions and get to know each other and thereby also trust each other. So I think in every type of project, if the bad people dynamics can kill a project, basically, even though the ambition is great, if there's some rivalry or fights between different sections, it will never lead to the targets that you would like to take it. So absolutely, I believe a lot in people dynamics as well.
Indeed, you need to have a baseline of common interest in what you need to do there, and then you can split the interest. If we keep sticking to the example of Umeå and Vasa, like Nikolaj said, there are different objectives of focus, maybe, that you can put into the same frame of collaboration, of attraction. And then if it's outright competition, it's difficult. In the projects in Denmark that Nikolaj has been heading, you also have rivalry. And I've been as a partner in this behind the curtain. There's still a little bit, where people they focus on their own. Just like this, people focus on their own thing, on their own region, on attraction, and so on. You can never really get rid of this. But at least if you have a trust-based collaboration, that you see, you take this part of the cake, and then maybe it can help us to get this part of the cake.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And that's when getting into discussions, Maria, also in the preparation, is to be open for a different separation of, normally you always have this project, then you have work packages or key activities, or what you either call them. And then, of course, having a separation to say, okay, we are the overall project lead, but you are the work package lead on this and that. Mm-hmm. That is mostly closely to your interest. And by having that discussions, it also opens up a bit more for the interest of people to be part of it. But of course, it can also, to some extent, that's a learning point. I think I've learned sometimes the compromising can also go too far. That in one of our big projects, I think we had 14 different work packages, and that was probably 5 too many or something like that. So not that nothing was done, but it just you share the money with a lot of different, and then each effort doesn't get enough focus. So of course there's a balance to how much compromising on getting a share for everybody in a project. Yeah.
Well, at this point, so I was actually thinking about like how when it's said that the bureaucracy is heavy in EU projects. So how about the follow-up? So is it is it possible to fail a EU project? I'm thinking that if you have a project that is written for 3 years and you notice that like now we have too many work packages and we cannot focus on this, so you are kind of putting less effort on something. So is it possible that the people evaluating your project see it as failed? So is it okay to fail, or how is it?
Yes, absolutely. It depends on how seriously you fail, of course. So if you don't get any of your KPIs done or something like that, of course, then the project might even be stopped. And that's also a possibility. But I think when you finally have gotten an EU project, I think the flexibility in changing things that doesn't work. And it's absolutely, if you get it and you say, we tried this out, it didn't work, what the EU administrators would want for you is then a plan. Okay, both a red light. Normally you have half year. We'll come back to that, I imagine. Half year reporting. And then, of course, if you see for two consecutive periods of half years that nothing is really changing, nothing is happening, or it doesn't work, you don't get anybody attracted, you don't get any into your program. So they would expect from you a plan for changing this or changing the effort. And if you don't do that, they could eventually stop the money. So it's possible to fail, but you also need an action plan for how then to succeed or change their activities.
Because it feels kind of simple to have these, domestic instruments, these regional development funds, because you have someone who is located in the same city with you. So you can like only call the person and, tell the situation that like, hi, we're stuck with this and this is not getting forward as planned. So how do you think, should we apply for change or something? But maybe, when it comes to EU projects, so the mindset is that, well, it's someone far away seated somewhere in another country, and you reach out by email. So the situation is a bit different, but have you seen it as a problem, or has it been like manageable?
No, locally, you can say that normally the EU projects are guided nationally. That means that you have an authority either regionally, depending on the size of the country and the organization. We started up having it regionally. We had regional development councils, I think they were called. That was actually guiding the regional EU offices that we were in dialogue with. But that was changed into one national setting in Denmark, which is a business board, basically. Which has a secretariat, and that's the discussion. That's a national secretariat that runs and guides and implements these EU funds. And I would say this precisely as you do locally, building up a relationship to these people is as important, both on the managerial level when you're in discussion on whether this project is relevant. Then you have an open discussion with these people about saying, okay, we intend to apply for this project. Can you see from your side being inside the instrument or the administrative side? Can you see that this project could go through? And do you see there's a chance at all? Because if they right away say, okay, that's stretching the EU the system too far, or that's not within the priorities of the EU, then they will simply let you know, and then you don't spend a lot of time trying to develop a project. So as well on the administrative side, even sometimes it's an administrative person sitting somewhere completely different in your country, but you are very dependent on being able to having talks with these people ongoingly, because you might have doubts. You will have doubts. As Niels was saying before, there's lots of complications in some of these projects. And if you don't know who to call or who to write to, I think you're giving yourself a difficult task.
Hello, I'm Chiara Ligori, and I'm so happy that I've joined this networking event. I invite you all to listen to the Grant podcast.
We need to zoom in, Nikolaj, and help a little bit here. The Maria and others out there that thinks, how can we start this? So first and foremost, one thing is that now we talked about partnership and the importance of that. So the networking part, and if I just paint the picture, within many EU funding corners, you have official networking events, you have brokerage events, and so on. But depends what kind of funding schemes we're talking about. So the funding scheme defines how you reach out for your network, how you can get an international network. And Nikolaj, can you, without going into super much detail, but what kind of funding schemes can you approach from the EU side within this corner?
Yeah, when we're talking about the talent attraction area and the regional development side of it, we've been using 3 instruments.
Mm-hmm.
One is all, you can say 1+1, but because there's 2 within the first one. It's the social funds, but it's both the regional fund and it's the social fund. So that the regional fund is both for best for regional development, has the possibility of also giving innovation to companies and so on and so forth, whereas the social fund is more into upskilling and competence development and competence attraction within a national setting. So both the regional funding and the social fund is basically a national instrument.
So let's just explain that for the listener. Also Maria understands fully. So this is EU money that the Commission hands over to national agencies, and then they administer the application process, handing out the funding and so on. But the Commission is overseeing how the money is being spent. They are overseeing the national agency, how they administer the money. So the national agency, they have rules and regulations applied to project implementation, and I have seen that in real time together with you, Nikolaj, how they say the communication you need logos, and so that we will cut the funding if you don't. That comes from the Commission to the agency saying we need you to check more up on this and this and this project. But your communication partner, Maria, your project officer, so to say, it's national. So you if you applied, Vasa, then you would have a Finnish person sitting in Helsinki, probably in an agency, that you would communicate with in relation to practicalities or questions on bureaucracy, whatever. Yeah?
Mm-hmm. And then the third instrument we've been using a lot is the Interreg, which is with the interregional funding. That's also money from the EU, but it's focused on regional areas of EU, and it has the demand that you need to be at least 2 countries in this. So it's a perfect instrument for you in the one that we're talking about between Sweden and Finland, Vasa and Umeå. It's an obvious one to use because that has that demand that it's a region within cross-national. At least 2 countries. They often prefer even more countries win, but 2 is enough. That's become the key instrument we used in our collaboration with our great Swedish partners, mainly in the southern part of Sweden, but we've also been attached to other parts in Sweden and Norway in using the Interreg. And Interreg, they have regional offices placed in the regions. So I imagine there's probably one around you. It's called Aurora, I understand.
Yeah, that's true. And that's actually the instrument we've been looking at. So
yeah. And that's, I don't know where the regional office for that is, but that could be placed in either Vasa, Umeå, or Uppsala, or Luleå, or where, I don't know. So you'll probably have to find out and then enter simply into discussion. Because as you were pointing out, Niels, before, these people have like a double role. They're both in the role of actually overlooking that the instrument is used right and the rules are followed and so on. But they're also motivators, and they would like the EU seeing the EU funds being used the right way. So they're also your best friends, best guides. And of course, in that sense, the closer collaboration you can get with them, the better, because then you also set up your project right, both administrative-wise, but also with the right focus, and you can get feedback for developing your project. And there, I think there's a difference that the Interreg offices are more engaged in actually guiding your projects. They're closer to, so to say. They have their own ambitions. They have strategies for the region. So they often would like to see that the project falls between or precisely within the categories of their strategic trajectories. So I think that's it's so important to go into a collaboration and start the discussion with them and around your ideas.
Come Mike.
No, I was just thinking that the difference between, I don't know, now we are from different countries, but as it seems, so there is more like reporting in the EU project as in many of the local instruments. So how would you see, entering a first EU project? So should one deep dive and take the project management right away, or should you hand over it to a more professional colleague? So how is there a huge difference? How do you see that?
Yeah, I would say if you have never been in one of these EU-funded projects before, I would absolutely advise you to find somebody that has, and then be a project partner first, and then learn from how things are done, and then eventually build up the capacity. We would never have dared entering into if we didn't actually join in with other organizations that had the resources and experiences with doing that. We were so fortunate. We are so fortunate to be in the same room or the same house as a wonderful Copenhagen, which is the best tourist organization of Copenhagen, and they had great experiences with EU funding from all types of projects, and they had the capacity of doing that, and not only one, but several very skilled. They had especially one very skilled person that knew all the rules. He had been working at Deloitte before, guiding EU projects from Deloitte, so he knows the rules back and forth. Without his capacity, we wouldn't have dared to take the project lead from the very beginning. It was only due to their capacities. I don't know whether you agree, Niels. Is that?
Oh, but I do, and it's always my recommendation: never, ever, for anything in this world, start out managing. Step in as a partner and take what fits your resources, what you can see you can allocate, and then see how things work. And if it tickles the right places to step into that big role, then you can pick that up later. What I wanted to make sure is, Nikolaj, before we move into shortly covering the application process in brief, but just shortly, finding partners within this area. Where did you have you done, what have you done actively from your side? Just sharing with Maria, how to, because one thing is that they know Umeå, but if you want to step into a new project, you need in Interreg, of course. Then they can stay in that corner. But else, just to give people an idea, also the listeners, how do you do your international networking within this area? Well, how have you done?
We simply found out who had. Now we'll take the very concrete example of Denmark and Sweden together, the southern part of Sweden. In that sense, of course, finding out who has this on their agenda for the southern Swedish part. We had like a counterpart, a sister organization in the Skåne region of the very southern part of Sweden called Invest in Skåne. They were an obvious partner. Then we have a university city, which is a highly renamed university city, the city of Lund, which is also in Skåne. So also working, and they had lots of international students. So they were also an obvious partner. So there's some actually by scouting out to see who has this on their agenda and how important is it for them. And then simply just reaching out, getting acquainted with the different people and then starting the discussion, should we do something together? And then normally what you see is to start with one or two key partners that you start the discussion with. And then the key partners could in their networks find out who should be then the collaboration partners on both the Danish and the Swedish side in that sense. So not come from the Danish side and says, we want to have precisely these 3-4 partners in a different country where we don't know anything of, but reaching out to 1 or 2 key partners and then let the national or regional key partners say, okay, who would we like to work further together with? For instance, just to take that as an example, in the project we have just to finalize now, called the Cross-Border Talent Bridge Project, we call it. There, the Swedish partners said that we have some excellent science parks that we'd like to have joining in the project, and that has been a huge asset to have the science park, as you said, Maria, without the demand and the direct request of the companies. And where do you find a big selection of companies being placed in one place? Some of the science parks. So, of course, it was a huge asset to have those on board as partners, because they already had meeting places for companies where you could disseminate the possibilities of doing talent attraction and so on and so forth. So I think that is very much the way we've done it, Niels. A bit dependent on what the purpose of the partnership is. Sometimes, of course, you could also be demanded that you need to cover the full area. Then you have to scout out to say, okay, if we are covering the full country of Denmark, then we need to have regional partners placed around the country. That was where we worked together, Niels, in that sense, to say we need to cover the country. But it could also be competence-based partnership seeking, to say, okay, who actually has the competence to solve the problem we have here? Just to give an example, of course, housing is often a huge problem when you're attracting internationals, where they're supposed to live, where there's affordable living. So who could you team up with that has that competence or have that availability of actually allowing or making sure that housing can be available for internationals? So that's a more, you can say, competence-based partner-seeking model.
Yeah, come on.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the groundwork you're doing before applying. So I know that the next round for Interreg Aurora will be in September. So something that I'm thinking of, that we might be running out of time this year. How much time would you take to prepare a good application? Is there some kind of golden rule that you have had?
1 year at least, I would say. If you are to do a good application, and you need to have everything in place and everything agreed upon, you can do it much faster if you have the partnership already. But if you are to build up the partnership, I would say your circumstance, from what I've heard, Maria, you're already acquainted with the people, you already know them, you have been working together before. Then you could actually it could be, if you don't want too much summer vacation, then it is plausible to go for the start of September with a project. Because, if you agree upon the division of labor and of what the main task is, it doesn't take you very long to write the project. It's not that. It's all that you have aligned, that you have the partnership aligned in order to actually be able to do it and implement it after.
Thanks. So the next block is exactly the application process and what actually happens.
Well, one more practical question, if thinking about writing a 3-year project, so how have you been doing with the kind of the leadership of the project? So have you had like monthly meetings, and how often do you recommend people to be seated like face to face with each other? So do you have any opinions or experiences on that?
Yes, I don't think there's one template that fits all the processes, but I think you need to be in the same room. Yeah. What we've done often is to make first. Often, what we've done in practice has been that we, as the lead partner of most of these projects, we've taken rounds. That means simply, if it's a national project, we jumped into a train or into a car, went out to the partners one by one, and then simply had discussions first with them individually to find out what are their interests, what are they aiming for, what are their situation, what are their potentials, what resources do they have, and all that. And then the next step has been to get all the partners, relevant partners, to be in a room together, either a half or full day actually development workshop where we could actually work with, and because that all both you could develop the different work packages and then what is to be done, but you also get to know each other, and that is so important. And then in the next phase is you can actually, and I would recommend to do that, is to centralize the writing process, because having one writing in one corner and one in another, it's better to actually say, okay, we are starting the writing process, and then we'll send it out for your comments and discussions, and then another meeting when you get to a certain point and say, okay, is this what we're going to do together, and do we fully agree, and so on and so forth. And then you always need to remember to have enough time to get partners agreements in place, and that's an extremely important part that you might only have to do for the application, a project declaration that you are in with this or that budget, that you are part of this project, but I would highly recommend that you, before applying even, that you make a partnership agreement on what are the precautions, what have you agreed upon, what is the sharing of the economy, what do you expect from each other, so on and so forth. Because the worst thing that can happen is that everybody goes into a project like this with different expectations, and then nobody's expectations are met. So rather be fairly clear on that before you even apply.
So this is something I'm thinking everybody's talking about AI, how it's taking over our work. So working with projects, so you are like not, you are still needed, when it's all about the interpersonal connection. So this is nothing AI can do for you. So when writing a project, you have to be doing it by yourself, not by a machine.
No, you can of course use the AI to write the application itself. When you have everything settled, you can use it as a big helper. But absolutely, building up the trust cannot be done through AI, at least for now. I don't know where the technology will take us.
Yeah, AI is a wonderful tool when it comes to structuring information, structuring text, and that's often what can be tricky when you write a proposal, because it's a lot of layers. There's a lot of things you need to be aware of. So when you develop a proposal or project that is, say, 4 years, you need to have different work packages that are covering what you want to do. So what does the specific talent attraction circle around in the concept? It can be, so you have blue workers, you have connection with the VETs, or connection with the companies, connection with the university, a collaboration work package where you have activities that do together, whatever. Now I'm just brainstorming in real time. Those things you need to put down on a piece of paper and sort of sketch it out, how a concept could look like. And then you need to fill in with the partners that we talked about 10, 20 minutes ago. You need to, what capacities do we need to fill in this? Strategically for what we want to do. How can we fill this in so it is binding together and looks like a coherent concept, project approach from the evaluator's point of view, because that is your key objective when you write a proposal. How is it being evaluated? So it's not just about writing the good, having a red thread, writing something where the budget is coming together with the right capacities and partners. You have to come. All this is feeding into that image that you want to give to the ones that are reading this and giving it marks, grades. Is this something we believe in? Can we fund this? Is this going to have an impact? So impact is often a key word when you write a proposal. It's a key section of the proposal template where you share with the evaluators what will come out of this, what footprints will you give, what will of actual in real life results will be in there that are lasting results, something that will, because the funding from the EU Commission's point of view and the agency's point of view, the funding is a help. The funding is a de-risker for stakeholders to be able to take a step they wouldn't be able to anyways, but they help you take off the risk, so the stakeholders take that risk and build up a new wonderful thing, but it has to be able to stand on its own. So what you do, and that's the problem, probably Nikolaj will agree with me, within this area, when funding runs out, things fall apart. Nothing is continued because it's difficult. The stakeholders within this area are public organizations, they're NGOs, they are organizations that generally do not have extra resources to do something. And that's the tricky part about this area. It's a tricky part in many EU funding areas, but particular what I noticed within this area when I was working together with Nikolaj is that things fall when there's no fund. So if you put in your proposal, when you think your concept, when you sit and work, let's just pretend you sit now, you go into a conversation with UMO, you find your partners, and when you sit down with those co-partners and say, how should we approach this next September 2027? We would like to approach the Interreg. It fits just what we want to do. What should you focus on in the first meetings? And my recommendation, impact. Can we come up with a concept where we can convince the evaluators that not only are we collaborating and attracting talent, but we are creating something that is lasting?
This is actually interesting because I work closely with the marketing manager of our company, and all the marketing we do for the region is about, recruitment and finding skilled workforce. And something she tends to say that it's impossible to, measure the marketing effects. And I kind of feel the same thing within talent attraction. So how can you evaluate? What kind of measures do you have? How do you measure impact? Is it like the amount of people you have encountered? I think the easier way would be to create some kind of model that can continue to exist even after the project is done. So do you have any tips? What kind of measurements?
It's a horrible area to measure impact. I've been in the project with Nikolaj, and it was a horrible case. We didn't think the project, not only Nikolaj, but the ones that supported with what should be measured, it wasn't thought through. So we were struggling a lot with the KPIs we had. I was on the receiving end with reaching those KPIs because it was almost impossible to reach them, because the perception of how we would reach that would be conservative thought when those measures were put in, but in the real world, it was almost impossible to reach those KPIs. But Nikolaj.
Yeah, but and a big amount of comments around. So I think I have a lot of things to this. First of all, I think I'll come back to you answering your question, Maria, but I'll start somewhere else. First, on the ambitions level, as you mentioned, is I think you should really take care when you apply these projects, because you would put ambitions high in order to get the project. But you have to remember that you have to deliver on these, and you have seen projects being cut in budget, saying, okay, you promised us 100 of this, you won't give us 100 of this, you only give us 20, then we cut 50% of your budget or something because you are not delivering. So it is actually, and that's where you should try to find a fine balance between how ambitious are we and what is enough to actually get the project, not being over ambitious because it comes after you. That's the first comment. The second comment is, normally it's very clearly put out what impact they expect. So if you go to the application process, it's often said very clearly, there's these 4, 5, or 6 criteria that we will judge your project on, and each of those have certain KPIs, certain impacts that are allowed. And the problem with attracting internationals is that it's somewhat very complicated to use these measurements, because normally if you go to the social fund, it is seen as participants that participates in a course that takes them from level 5 in their competence level to level 3. And then they could say, okay, I've spent this amount of hours, and you have my personal number here, and this amount of hours, and you get this exam, and then you could say, okay, we've taken 100 persons from level 5 to level 3 in their competence. With the internationals, they don't have a personal number because you're attracting them from abroad. So coming back to your question, Maria, we've had all types of dialogues with the authorities about what is allowed here. Normally, we've been working with a funnel, saying that could we measure something about the amount of people that we attract to our web pages, and then could we then say the next level is that we go into some dialogue with them? And then the next level again, could we invite them for events or something that we start, or for a competence development course? That could also be for internationals that are abroad, that you could actually participate in some online course or something like that. And then of course at a certain point you need to have them like sign something that they're saying that I participate in this course or something like that.
Yeah.
And of course, it's much easier if you're looking at retention of people that are studying in Vasa or studying in UMO and transferring them into the labor market. That's much easier to measure. But in any case, I would advise you to get as much data and select the data points, but you need to look, are these data points equivalent to the ones they would like to see?
Yeah.
So if they would like to see that 100 persons are getting a new competence level, how can you do that with internationals? Is that a course that they learn something about Vasa, they learn some Finnish, they do something like that? So you got somebody that you could register for that course and say you've taken them from A to B. So it's very much looking at what are the KPIs of the different criteria, and then saying, how do we create the impact? And then, as you say, Niels, how can things work after the project? That's becoming more and more and more important in the evaluation schemes. Because they've seen it, they've seen a graveyard of projects that the project ended and nothing was there afterwards. So they're really wanting to see that. How can this live on after the project?
Yeah, but I would say, if you use a little bit of common sense when you sit and write it, when you sit with the project concept, when you sit and discuss with, but if you use it just a little bit of, let's try to disregard the funding. Let's just, what would a nice way of doing this look like? How could we do this? What would we really like to do from the experience we have as professionals working with this? What would be something that would really make a difference for this community? Or what are the people that actually do come? What do they love about being here? And then, taking that stomach feeling, and then try to channel that into, instead of creating a funding monster, that to impress somebody, you need to impress. You need to. When I say focus on the impact, that doesn't not mean that you shouldn't disconnect yourself from reality. As I say, it's very, very important. But that is just what I try to say is that is what will carry the project through the evaluation. That you show as an applicant that you understand that this is taxpayers' money. You understand that this is a help for you to create something that you could not create otherwise, but you understand that it has to be able to carry it out by itself without funding, or with you can also say we will try to find alternative funding afterwards, but at least you put it into a context where you say, we understand where the money comes from. We understand that this is not a project machine that can only live if we get funding. Yeah, that will always help. It will always help when you are applying, and it also help you to root yourself in the real world when you write.
So just to be very concrete, and maybe I'd like to correct myself a little bit, not to be too but if you start a completely new big project, you might need a year. But if you, as I said before, if you have the partners already, you have a trust-based relationship, then you can do it absolutely faster. but you shouldn't forget that the last couple of weeks at least needs to just at least, because you need to fill out a lot of papers, and these papers need to be signed, and often you need to have time in each organization to go to management to get them signed, and so on and so forth. So never underestimate, even though you've had a beautiful project layout with all the right work packages and all that things, there's a bunch of things that you need to do also besides that, to sign declarations and get the management to approve it, the budgets, and so on and so forth. And maybe a certain note on the budget is that you've seen it so many times that these projects, you need to have a buffer in these projects, because there's so many unseen aspects that suddenly pops up somewhere, somehow. So you also, that's what I'm talking about, the trust-based relationship, is that you as a key partner, you need to be in control of the budget. And that also means that you need to put aside a buffer for administrative tasks and other stuff, because there are surprises coming. And by doing that, and you need to accept from your partners that we put aside this money, and what happens with that money if we don't use it. So that's why I'm talking about these partner agreements done before the project, because doing that afterwards would disappoint everybody and start a discussion over the resources.
Yeah, and I don't know if you, when it comes to the time that needs to be taken to the planning. So I'm thinking that you still want to do something that creates impact, that feels meaningful. Mm-hmm. I think people working with these kind of tasks, they want to help people, they want to help the region. So you are kind of, limiting yourself from doing something else by going into a project. So that you're not over promising and just like pleasing other partners that, we can be a part of the project just to get the funding, but then you're like limiting your own resources from something that might be more important for the region. So it's also about having this common sense and, this like vision that what needs to be done. And if you are committing yourself and your resources for a 3-year period, so it has to be something that is actually, you can feel that this will give you some sort of impact, that this will help the region and the people. So I would not agree that much upon that, need for time in the planning section. So.
Now, what I always try to secure in my episodes is to have a little bit of reflections and advice section here. It has been an episode full of advice and reflections, but is there anything, starting with you, Maria, is there anything do you have any hopes of what to achieve next, or do you have anything you want to share?
I think like the next step is actually to move from ambition to this structured collaboration. So what I see, this has been a real good discussion, and something I see is that we need to book appointment or some few days with my colleagues in Umeå so that we are, meeting up with each other and actually, brainstorming the ideas and agreeing upon the need to apply for a project. And now as I'm thinking, so it might be that we would be applying next spring. That could be realistic, but so to somehow start the planning, because it's so easy to talk nice things always when you meet each other, but we also have this political pressure. We have our politicians, they have agreed upon the strategy and they are waiting to see some results, and doing this, pro bono, we are not having any concrete, nothing's happening. We have like these good your thoughts and ambition, but nothing's happening. So we need to set up some meetings now and just start.
And don't forget, actually, Maria, that you can invite the Interreg office. So you could have, if we're talking 2 days, you could have like a possibility of spending 1 day together with your partners in Umeå, and then the second day actually invite the Interreg office to come and give you some guidelines or discussions and discuss the project with them. They're often very willing to actually come, and if not possible physically, then they could be online, because then you could right away find out, are we on the right track? Do they see the same? And of course, the best thing you can do is to read very clearly into the Interreg Aurora's plans and ambitions, and see in which, and then of course, so sometimes they have a lot of projects within one project field. We've seen that several times, that the innovation part of, they had one with innovation, and that box of money was emptied right away, and then it was more in the labor market section they had money. And then of course, if you are able to see that what you're doing could fit in there, then you could have a discussion on saying, okay, what demands are there if we take it into a different funding scheme within the project or within the Interreg system. But my main reflections is that I think a good partnership is key. Great partners that you actually, as we talked about before, that you would like to be together with and enjoy working with. Of course, the opportunity of you doing a great project together is much higher. Big ambitions, and then follow the economy dead close. Because you can burn your fingers heavily if you don't do that. Just to put an example, we had a project where we needed a lot of participants' registrations. We did a lot of registrations, but a lot of the registrations were let down because they lacked the signature. There was the wrong date on them or something like that, and you can lose millions if you don't take care. So you need to, and maybe on that note, we've been talking a lot about bureaucracy. I think actually it's becoming easier and easier to run these type of projects. So I think the authorities, both nationally and on the EU level, are trying to make it easier. But of course, as you said before, Niels, it's taxpayers' money, so they need to have some control on them. But I think they're making it easier with different schemes, that you can have a project with a 40% overhead scheme. So that means you don't have to send a lot of invoices over to the business board or to somebody else controlling that. But especially on the hours and on the time registration for participants, you should really look into that very carefully and have some very professional to follow that, because that's where you can burn your fingers.
The grand toughest challenge, final segment in all my episodes. I always have it. So, Maria, what do you find the toughest challenge? Funding within talent attraction. What do you think? I know it's different because you are approaching it, but what's your thoughts?
What to say? I think the biggest problem is the limiting mindset. We are kind of focused on the competition here, and many kind of minor partners who would be entering the project. So they are like talking about the negative, possible negative aspects, and I'm seeing that there is no other way out in this race, because smaller regions, maybe Copenhagen, you have a good reputation. Helsinki has a good reputation, but nobody knows about Vaasa. I don't think they know about Umeå either. So there are more possibilities than what there are threats out there, so that we could get all the whole network engaged in this, because as we discussed earlier, this is not only about the big project partners, it's all about the network that's around us. So getting everybody involved. So I have been doing this lobbying work, but I'm thinking that this needs to continue until we start the writing process, so that we have like everyone aligned and feeling the same thing about it.
Thanks. Nikolaj, toughest challenge?
Yeah, I think we were touching upon it before. Being in this game for 13 years at least, I've actually worked with EU funding before as well. I've even worked in the EU as a pre-accession advisor, assisting countries to getting into. So I'm that old, getting into the EU in 2004. But I think getting things to roll after projects ends, I think that is basically some of the toughest challenges, because sometimes you you get this funding, you have all the right ambitions, but then the finances, it kills everything. So plan for how can this run after the project, and maybe build it into the project itself and say, okay, midway, we need to have a clear plan for how this can run afterwards. And then we need 1.5 years. If it's a 3-year project, then we have at least a year or maybe 1.5 years to set up how this can run afterwards. And sometimes that is difficult to convey and convince the EU funding partners that we should have that time, but they want it, and it takes time to find out that model, these models, whether it's funded by companies chipping in or it's some other situation, but that takes time.
Thanks. Now, I'm just going to land the plane before we say goodbye to the listeners. So, dear listeners, thank you so much for listening to this. A little longer than normal, but you know me out there, especially my regulars. I don't let a good conversation stop. I let people speak out. If you're a newcomer, and you might be, because this is Talent Attraction, I have a lot of my network interested in this, so you might be the first time you're listening to the grant. I have a treat for you if you have an interest in funding and you like listening to podcasts, because I have more than 200 podcast episodes on my platform, Spotify, Apple Podcast, wherever, on EU funding. It's not, of course, the first one on Talent Attraction, but there's a lot about how to prepare proposals, implement projects, and so on. So go to my website, thegrant.eu. You'll find all episodes of the podcast universe. And while you get in there and you browse around and say, wow, what's this? Is super cool. How can I support this guy? You can do that very simply by connecting to my email list. There's an online form on every page on my website where you simply just fill it in. And then you receive an email every time I release a podcast episode. So thanks in advance for that. And finally, SoMe. You don't get anywhere in this world without SoMe. So connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm the only one and the only person in the world with this name, Niels Tudor Winter. You should be able to find me. And also go and like the grant page on LinkedIn. That's where the fun happens. That's where the flow is. That's where I pick up guests. In this case, not, because these are old contacts this today. But a lot of my guests, I pick them up on LinkedIn if they post something nice and interesting that I want to share with listeners. It's always this exit preach to people, as the organ playing in the background. Thank you so much for joining me. It's been a fantastic conversation, and honestly, I feel like it's not the last time that the three of us has been in a virtual podcast studio together, because what we can do is, if Maria she gets moving a little bit with this, then we might take a follow-up conversation about what's going on and what's happening and so on. So I would invite you both in advance for that.
Thank you so much, and thanks for having us. Yeah, and it's been a real pleasure. And Maria, now it's I've played the part of the experience part, but the amount of mistakes behind me is as big as the successes. So I think there's also a try and error part of this.
We all
the best intentions. Yeah. So let's take it from there.
Let's say goodbye to the listeners. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Grant. All the Grant episodes have their own site on the Grant website. You'll find a link to the episode site where you listen to your podcast. On the site for this episode, you'll find links to Maria and Nikolaj's LinkedIn sites, plus, of course, links to their respective organizations. You will also find a link to my timeline series on proposal development and my implementation series on project implementation. Next week, I will present a brand new podcast concept called Explain Science. Here I will dig into the actual science from EU projects to fold it out for a broader public. First up is battery science and life cycle assessment from the Novak project. You can indeed look forward to that.